Welcome to another episode of Lies of the Orange Era. And before you ask, yes, this show is about exposing all the bullshit, not just the orange bullshit.
Quite frankly, the response to the first show last Monday was universally glowing.
Because here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit. Joe Biden's broken promise to be a one-term president directly enabled everything we're dealing with right now.
Jon Stewart is facing massive backlash from Democrats over his comments about Joe Biden. Oberman tweeted, "Well, after 9 years away, there's nothing else to say to the both side is fraud Jon Stewart bashing Biden except, please make it another 9 years." Christy Jackson tweeted, "Sorry, but I won't be watching you either."
Maybe not universal.
The military deployment in California, the constitutional crisis, the show literally wouldn't exist if Biden had kept his word. So let's talk about the original sin that broke America's democracy. An 82-year-old man's ego and the cowards who enabled it. Let me show you exactly what Biden promised in 2020. Here's the video.
Look, I view myself as a bridge, not as anything else. There's an entire generation of leaders you saw stand behind me. They are the future of this country. They're the people who are going to...
And that wasn't a one-off. His own campaign advisors told Politico in 2019 it was virtually inconceivable that Biden would run for re-election. They said, quote, "If Biden is elected, he's going to be 82 years old in 4 years and he won't be running for re-election." He called himself a transition candidate, a bridge to the next generation. But here's the kicker. When reporters asked him about this during the 2020 campaign, you know what he said?
Refer to yourself as being a bridge candidate for a younger, fresher generation of Democratic leaders, and I wanted to know what changed.
What changed was the gravity of the situation I inherited.
Oh, the gravity changed?
Well, that was on Twitter. Everything on Twitter gets a backlash. I've seen Twitter tell labradoodles to go themselves.
No, Joe, your ego changed. You got a taste of power and decided, actually, maybe I'll keep this a little longer. Here's the universal truth about power. It doesn't want to let go. And it corrupts everyone, even the supposedly decent guys. Biden genuinely believed he was the only one that could beat Trump. That's what they all believe. Every aging politician thinks they're indispensable. Without me, democracy dies. But you know what's really indispensable? Keeping your word. You campaigned as a bridge, not as a Golden Gate bridge that never gets torn down. In his inner circle, they enabled this delusion because they were terrified of losing power. Nobody wanted to be the one to tell the president of the United States that he looked like he belonged at an assisted living facility, not the Oval Office. The New York Times editorial board had to publicly beg him to step down after that debate. That's like your own mother taking out a newspaper ad saying you're embarrassing the family. But let's talk about the Democratic Party and the supposed adults in the room who couldn't tell an 81-year-old man the word no.
I just think it's better to deal head on with what's an apparent issue to people. I mean, we're just talking here.
They went so far left, they lost working class voters who should have been slam dunks against Trump. And instead of having a real primary where voters could choose, they coronated an incumbent who could barely complete sentences. Where was the primary? Where were the debates? Where was the democratic process in the Democratic Party? They skipped the whole thing because they knew Biden couldn't survive actual scrutiny.
And Mary Trump tweeting, "Not only is Stewart's both sides are the same rhetoric not funny, it's a potential disaster for democracy."
It's one show. It was just one show. I get 20 minutes of one show.
And then when Biden finally stepped aside 4 months before the election, they handed the nomination to Kamala Harris and had never been vetted by primary voters. She dropped out of the 2020 primary before Iowa because she couldn't even poll above single digits with her own party. That's your plan B? The consultants who enabled this should never work in politics again. These people couldn't strategize their way out of a paper bag with GPS and a flamethrower. They were so busy protecting Biden's feelings that they forgot to protect democracy. And here's the darkly hilarious part. If Biden had kept his word, this show probably wouldn't exist. Think about it. If Biden had stepped aside in 2023, like he implied he would, Democrats would have had a real primary. A younger, competent Democrat probably beats Trump in a landslide. No constitutional crisis, no military deployment against American citizens, no Stephen Miller threatening to suspend habeas corpus. Instead, we get an 81-year-old man whose biggest achievement was convincing himself he could handle 4 more years, when he couldn't handle a 90-minute debate without looking like he needed medical assistance. So, thanks, Joe. Thanks for breaking your promise. Thanks for putting your ego above the country.
But I guess, as the famous saying goes, democracy dies in discussion.
Thanks for giving us 4 more years of Trump's dismantling constitutional government. Your stubbornness didn't just cost the Democrats the election, it enabled the authoritarian takeover you claimed to be fighting against. But here's the thing, this isn't just about Democrats. This is about both parties failing America in spectacular fashion.
I have sinned against you. I'm sorry. It was never my intention to say out loud what I saw with my eyes and then brain. I can do better.
Republicans enabled Trump's worst impulses because they were terrified of his own Twitter account. Democrats enabled Biden's worst impulses because they were terrified of admitting that they backed the wrong horse. Republicans worship a wannabe dictator who thinks the Constitution is a suggestion. Democrats worship political fossils who think 1987 was a recent year. It's a geriatric death match where democracy loses either way. Both parties have completely lost the ability to police themselves. Self-reflection is dead. Accountability is extinct. It's just tribal warfare, where winning matters more than governing.
And my wife thinks I'm a total loser. I'm a loser.
And while they're off playing Game of Thrones with senior citizens, the country burns, literally. California's firefighters are standing guard over federal buildings instead of fighting fires because an 82-year-old's ego enabled a wannabe dictator's return to power. And here's the real lesson from Biden's portrayal. Power never gives up power willingly, ever. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal. Once you taste the real power, you'll rationalize any reason to keep it. Biden convinced himself that breaking his promise was noble because only he could save democracy. Meanwhile, he enabled the exact authoritarian he claimed to be fighting by running a campaign he was physically incapable of winning. And his enablers in the Democratic Party convinced themselves that loyalty to an aging politician was more important than loyalty to democratic principles. You want to know why Trump is back? You want to know why we're facing a constitutional crisis? Look in the mirror, Democrats. Your decent guy was so indecent that he broke his word to the American people and handed the presidency back to a fascist. So yes, this show is called Lies of the Orange Era, but the lies aren't just orange. They're blue too. They're red and blue and every color in between because power corrupts everyone, and both parties have completely lost the plot. Biden's broken promise is a perfect example of how good intentions can pave the road to hell, or in this case, 4 more years of Trump. The next time a politician tells you they're running for the good of the country, ask yourself, are they really serving the country, or are they serving their ego? Because Joe Biden chose his ego, and now we're all paying the price. If this episode made you angry, good, stay angry. And remember this lesson: the next time any politician, Republican or Democrat, tries to convince you that they're indispensable, nobody is indispensable. Everyone is replaceable, and power should never be a lifetime appointment, especially when you promised it wouldn't be. Subscribe if you want more honest accountability for both parties, because somebody has to call out the bullshit even when it's blue.